1 in 5 workers in our country wasn't born here. That percentage is increasing. And that means that every affiliate of the AFL-CIO in every community in this country represents immigrant workers with every type of status. And we know that we can't fight for some workers. We have to fight for all workers. So I think there's a clear understanding and commitment to owning immigration as a labor issue, as a threshold, which is important. And I would say that at its crux, our policy agenda is about ensuring that immigration status doesn't serve as a barrier to worker organizing and empowerment, and that all workers have equal and enforceable rights on the job.
Hello, powerful people, and welcome back to Power at Work. My name is Seth Harris. I'm a senior fellow at the Burns Center for Social Change, and I'm delighted to welcome you back for this blogcast. Today I'm going to be talking with two of the labor movement's most important experts on immigration as an economic and public policy matter. We'll talk about immigration's role in the current political debate, and we will also talk about efforts by unions in some sectors to organize immigrant workers. But before we get to our discussion, you should know that Power at Work is a proud member of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. The Labor Radio Podcast Network connects over 200 labor radio shows and labor podcasts. To learn more about the network or to find other terrific labor radio shows and labor podcasts, please go to www.laborradionetwork.org. And if you want to listen to or download any or all of the Power at Work blogcasts in podcast form, they're available for streaming and download on Spotify, Overcast, and Apple Podcasts. Just type in Power at Work. We will pop right up. And then you have two assignments. One, subscribe. That way you won't miss any of the podcasts. And two, give us a 5-star rating. That will help people like you who care about workers and worker power to find our podcasts. They will appreciate it, and so will we. So today we're talking about labor and immigration. Now, because you're a savvy and aware audience, I don't need to tell you that immigration is one of the top issues in the 2024 election. But that's really not new. Even though we're a nation of immigrants, maybe because we are a nation of immigrants, we have been fighting about immigration since the days of the Know Nothing Party in the 1850s and maybe even before that. The immigration debate has been about xenophobia and racism and religious bigotry and identity, but it has also been about jobs and the economy. And organized labor has long been at the center of the debate. For a long period of time, labor's argument was that immigrants were taking union members' jobs. But that position has evolved to be much more supportive of immigrants and immigration, particularly when it comes to labor rights for immigrants. But the labor movement's position is, I think it's safe to say, nuanced, because the issues of immigration are complex. They tend to get grotesquely oversimplified in the political debate, but immigration is a quite complex issue. We will discuss that evolution and those nuances with our guests today. And as I promised you at the top, we've got two genuine experts to help us understand these issues and parse through the complexities. I'm joined by Shannon Lederer, who's the Director of Immigration Policy for the AFL-CIO, and Lety Salcedo, Director of SEIU's Immigration Reform Program. Now, I want to give you a little bit of a warning. We experienced some technical difficulties when recording this blogcast. You're going to hear some, let's say, wayward noises, and the volume may go in and out a little bit, but you should be able to hear everything sufficiently clearly. And let me promise you that the content is well worth your time, even if there are a few glitches here and there. So with that, those are our guests. You are our audience. Here is our conversation. Enjoy. Lety and Shannon, thank you so much for being on Power at Work with us today to talk about a topic you both care about a lot and is very, very important to our country. And with your permission, I want to start very, very broadly to put the immigration debate in context, and then we can move into more specific issues later on in our conversation. So I'm going to really put it in a big context, and it's this. Immigration has been a part of the American political and economic debate for at least 175 years. And let's be blunt, it's not really a problem that's going to be solved. It's really endemic to who we are as Americans and who we are as a country. Why we repeatedly call ourselves, unlike the rest of the developed world, a nation of immigrants. And except for those people who can trace their lineage back to the indigenous tribes of this part of the world, and they've all been here for centuries, all of us are the issue of immigrants of one generation or another. I am second generation American. And that's just a fact. It's a fact of American life. So here's my very high level question for you. And Lety, let me start with you on this. What are we fighting about when Americans fight about immigration?
Thank you, Seth. Happy to be here with you all. So as the daughter of immigrants to this country, my parents came to the U.S. in 1967. I speak from experience on the value that immigrants seek, a better life for themselves and to thrive, just like any family would love to do is to thrive. I think this is a made-up fight by the right, and it has been elevated to a new level by Trump and the MAGA. The right is about power to define the tax code, power to define the allocation of the social safety net. And to what that does is enrich the top 1% or the elite. The right likes to define immigration as a zero-sum game. What does that do? It creates divisions amongst us so that they can advance their agenda. That means lower wages for workers, control how women make their choice about their bodies, and rewrite the rules and write us out of write workers out of it. So the other thing to take into account is the undercurrent, which is that this country is headed to be a majority minority country. They see that as a loss of power. And what does that mean? That means that they see power sort of leaving their hands. And so we want to, continue to elevate what it means for us. For us, it's about the dignity of people. It's the dignity for families to stay together and for all families to thrive, workers included.
So, Shannon, let me ask you the same question. In your experience, what do you think is at the core of the American fight? Oh, and maybe you would make this the global fight over immigration, because we're not unique in the world right now. There are right-wing anti-immigrant parties in Germany and a lot of other Central European and actually not Southern, but Northern European countries, Western European countries. It's a big issue around the world. What is at the core of the American version of this fight?
Sure. Thanks, Seth. I'd just sort of like to associate myself with a lot of the analysis that Lety just laid out, which I think is dead on. There's obviously a huge amount of identity politics that get embroiled in the immigration debates and are being very intentionally fomented by right-wing politicians here and globally. And as you note, I'm also the daughter of immigrants. Immigration has been a part of the engine driving our economy, shaping our culture from the beginning. And so right now, I think at the heart of the question that we really have to grapple with is this idea of whether we see as a nation increasing diversity of our culture and our workforce as a source of strength and vitality or as a threat. And I was really struck by a poll that I saw recently that shows this very steep increase among Republican respondents viewing the increase in the number of people from different races, ethnic groups, and nationalities as threatening rather than enriching to our culture. In just 5 years, it went up from 21 to 55%, showing that as a threat. So I think that this is kind of at the crux of what we're going to have to grapple with as a nation if we want to move forward with a constructive conversation. And I think it's a sign that the very intentional efforts to stoke this division of fear are having an impact, and that we need to do a lot more to push back with our popular education and ensure that we can really start to have the question about what are the policies that serve our national interests and align with our democratic principles and I guess our ever evolving struggle to live up to them.
So I want to react to what you both just said in this way, because it's entirely consistent with my experience with this debate as well. But it shapes the public policy problem in an extremely difficult way. Because if the problem is fear, the remedy is not so obvious, particularly when you have very significant forces in our society, including some media, certainly some politicians, some cultural figures, others who find a way to make money off of separating workers out from amongst one another, dividing workers. It becomes extraordinarily difficult to solve because there's an old saying in the law that you can't unring the bell or you can't get the drop of ink out of the glass of milk. Once the fear has been stoked, it seems to me, Shannon, let me give you a chance to respond to this. It seems to me it's very difficult to unfrighten people.
Well, I mean, I think I think the best hope that we have to combat these intentional divide and rule tactics is to get really local with what we're doing. And what we find is that that doing efforts locally, let's say opening a union hall to host a clinic where we're bringing families in, showing really promoting interaction, humanizing issues, putting a face on it, bringing families together. I think this is work that has to be done intentionally and locally, and that it's going to be that kind of ground up understanding and solidarity that helps to sort of push back on this incredibly corrosive national rhetoric, and and is also critical to any efforts that we have to rebuild worker power and to advance, a pro-worker policy agenda.
Lety, what do you think? How do we unfrighten people? Do you agree that we have to do it locally and it's sort of a community at a time?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the machine that has created this fear has deep pockets, and it has had an impact. And obviously we see that in the way people have responded to migrants coming to different cities. We've seen it in the way that some polls are showing, right, that people are even certain communities are against their own community coming as migrants. We've seen some of that, but in communities that we know, like in Chicago, in New York, there's efforts that like clinics, like businesses working with government to place people who have recently migrated, because businesses need workers, right? In upstate New York, for example, I'll name the Ellis Island project as one of those. And so just Those are the efforts that we have to do to repair the damage that the deep pockets of the right and their machine have created to divide communities and advance their agenda.
Right. I think we've seen a sort of empowering and deeply disappointing example of this in the debate that's been going on over the last couple of weeks about Springfield, Ohio, where there is a large group of Haitian immigrants who are in the United States legally, and apparently they are very productive workers, and they're the local businesses, particularly some of the manufacturing businesses in the community, have needed their help and have felt very strongly about that they've been successful there. The mayor is very favorable towards the community. The governor is very favorable towards the community. There are some issues, there are some language issues, which are almost always the case when you have new immigrants coming to the United States. There's some strain on the healthcare system because you have more people who are demanding healthcare. Not again a surprise. Let me say that's a problem that's across the United States, not just where we have immigrants. But there was a national effort to stoke fear by telling lies about those Haitian TPS, temporary protective status immigrants into the United States. But locally, they have really been embraced and protected. So I take that point as a very, very powerful one. But I invited you on. I'm sorry, go ahead, Shannon.
Oh, no, and I was just going to say that we saw unions like the United Fruit and Commercial Workers and the United Auto Workers really speaking up and saying an attack on these folks is an attack on our unions. It's an attack on our members, and making this a we fight, I think, is really part of this. Isn't about them versus us. This is about, us as labor movement, as a workforce. So that was really heartening to see. And I think is part of, it gives us a guide for the work that we need to be doing locally to really ensure that this is seen as a core part of our labor struggle.
Yeah, I'm going to have to pay you extra, Shannon, because that's the perfect transition to where I wanted to take this conversation, because you're both immigration experts, but for our purposes, and most importantly, you're labor immigration experts. So I want to add labor into the mix. By the way, I love telling people things they already know about themselves, and there I go again. Don't feel bad. I did it with Senator Bernie Sanders just a couple of weeks ago. So I want to add the labor movement into the discussion. So in the days of the Knights of Labor, many, many, many years ago, but also in the first several decades of the American Federation of Labor, organized labor was rather strongly opposed to immigration. The argument then was that immigrants were taking the jobs of union members. Does that sound familiar? Of course it does. But that position, the labor movement's position, has evolved. I think it's safe to say, and you can correct me if I've got this wrong, but the labor movement now, I think, it's safe to say, has abandoned much of its institutional opposition to immigration as a whole, but its position is more complicated than simply being either pro-immigrant or anti-immigrant. So, Lety, let me start with you, because I perceive SEIU as one of the most pro-immigrant worker forces, not merely in the labor movement, but maybe in our society and culture as a whole. How would you sum up SEIU's perspective on immigration right now, particularly its perspective on immigrant workers, some of whom are your members?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, we are one of the largest, if you sort of take the labor union side to consider us, we're one of the largest immigrant rights organizations in the country. We represent workers who toil in buildings, cleaning after people leave their offices, secure those buildings at airports, in healthcare facilities, and in state and local government. Workers who are immigrants toil in all those industries. So immigration and immigration policy is personal for us. And we set out, our leadership set out earlier this year in June, actually, to win the future for workers. What does that mean? That means that includes all workers, not just immigrants. To organize the future, that means we must organize millions of workers and employees. We're partnering with AFL to do those things. We must win political power. And we must win cross-racial solidarity to build a multi-generational union and labor movement where leaders, workers who are leaders in their union, advance the unions for all theme, to win unions for millions of workers, to make our union an anti-racist union, to build, use technology to win, win unions from many, many workers. And so our policy is really centered at the heart of us being a multi-generational uh, union that is has people from across the globe, and that's what centers our policy and our stance.
I just want to dig into one piece of what you just said. What does it mean, sort of operationally, to be an anti racist union and a multiracial coalition union? What does that look like?
Yeah, it means reaching out to partners who work beyond labor on issues that matter to our members. It means, fighting uh, on the issues that workers aren't just workers, right? They live in communities. They're affected by climate. They're affected by a woman's right to choose. They're affected by police in their community. So we approach our work to touch on people's lives as workers. They work, but they also live in this community. So to be an anti-racist organization is to be conscious of how we sit in the world and how we use our power as a labor union to fight for uh, workers of all races and to make sure that we are fighting for the policies that affect us across race.
Yeah, yeah. Cindy Estrada, who runs the Center for Transformational Organizing at the AFL, used the phrase that I very much like, and that is, she talked about organizing that's expanding the we. And actually, Shannon, you used a version of that later. That may end up being the theme of this talk that we're having, expanding the we. And I think, Lety, that's a version of what you were just talking about. So, Shannon, the AFL-CIO is a very, very, very diverse organization. I mean, diverse in every imaginable way: occupation, not just race and gender and ethnicity and geography, but also occupations. I mean, you're an organization that has affiliates who are professional rugby players and who are grocery store workers and teachers and public employees and machinists. And I mean, I could list, if I leave out the seafarers, my friends, that my former employers at the seafarers are going to be very upset with me. So also seafarers are part of that as well. So I want to ask you what's your perspective on what the labor movement's current view of immigration is, but I also want to ask how that view varies across unions, if it does. And are some unions a little more favorable towards immigration and others maybe a little bit more skeptical of it?
Yeah, we have a really big tent. And that is, that is key. We have a chance to have conversations in our family that bring really important diversity of perspective that we don't get many other places. Doesn't make our job easier, but I think it makes it really, really important. And I would say that, we have 1 in 5 workers in our country wasn't born here. That percentage is increasing. And that means that every affiliate of the AFL-CIO in every community in this country represents immigrant workers with every type of status. And we know that we can't fight for some workers. We have to fight for all workers. So I think there's a clear understanding and commitment to owning immigration as a labor issue, as a threshold, which is important. And I would say that at its crux, our policy agenda is about ensuring that immigration status doesn't serve as a barrier to worker organizing and empowerment, and that all workers have equal and enforceable rights on the job. And so, that's why we have, support for a pathway to citizenship as the centerpiece of our policy agenda, because we know that's the best way to ensure equity in the workplace. It's also why we are opposed to the expansion of these company-controlled visa pathways that turn workers into disposable commodities and, deny their rights. And so I think we have a very sort of strong national commitment to unity, really strong national resolutions. And I think that, the urgency with which our various affiliates approach the issue really kind of depends on, how the issue is manifesting for their membership, right? For their growth potential and things like that. I think we're in an exciting period of increased organizing, and that has brought, from the ground up, more energy to the need to address this, the structural impediments that we have with the, current immigration system, and so that brings energy from the ground, but which is really key to moving any of this forward. But I think that, we have different industries have experienced the impact of the broken immigration system in different ways. And so we have to have alignment both on the need to uplift the rights of all workers in our country, full stop, and to reject these sort of neoliberal corporate immigration policy agenda, which is actually a threat to, to all workers.
Oh, well, you can't just throw that in and not explain what you're talking about. What is the neoliberal corporate immigration policy agenda that you want to be careful doesn't get adopted?
Well, I think, what we've seen is, for a lot of reasons, that people in the face of a labor shortage, they want workers, but they don't want people. They don't want families. They want to bring folks in temporarily under the control of the boss, paid what they want, living in company housing, send them back. And that's not a formula that we're done with. I mean, that's not a recipe for strong wages, sustainable, family supporting jobs. So, we want the answer to labor shortages to be increased resettlement, families in our communities come into our schools, and, we want those, and not a disposable on-demand workforce. And so, I think that's a big sort of heart of the policy question around future flows. As we see increased needs, are we going to accept more asylees, refugees, and really have a new wave of that sort of revitalizing our industries and our communities, or are we going to turn to this more exploitative model, which I think is not what migrants need to deserve, especially those who have been forcibly displaced, and is really dangerous for our efforts to lift standards in our industries.
Hey, I'm Carlos Aramayo. I'm the president of Unite Here Local 26, and I'm here to let everyone know that you should go and you should subscribe now to Power at Work.
State Representative Christopher Worrell. Make sure you subscribe to Power at Work.
Hi, I'm John Merrick. I'm 83 years old, retired from the Fairmont Copley Plaza for 7 years, where I was a bartender and a server. And I want to recommend and support Power at Work. And I suggest that people, especially working people, subscribe to its mission.
We're talking about labor and immigration with Lety Salcedo and Shannon Lederer. I want to turn, and this is a sure way to get people to turn off their podcast, is I'd like to turn to economics. Let's see if people stick with us after I say that. So the widely held view, I know you both know this, but I want to share it with our audience. The very widely held view among economists, particularly labor economists, but I think also macroeconomists, is that immigration is absolutely essential to economic growth in the United States. And it's really just a simple math problem for them. We need more workers for a growing economy, both in the short term and in the long term. But our birth rate and our fertility rate won't supply us with enough people to foster that economic growth that we all would like to see happen. So we need immigrants to fill our jobs and grow our economy. And let me say, that's not a new condition. That has been true in the United States, really, certainly since the industrial age, but arguably even long before that. The challenge is, or a challenge is, that immigrant workers whose legal status is not fully secured, especially undocumented immigrants, are more vulnerable to exploitation. And employers who exploit immigrant workers in the ways that Shannon was just talking about, and in other ways as well, drive down wages and labor standards for all workers. And we've seen some, I think, truly horrible, despicable examples of this kind of exploitation in a number of cases involving migrant children working in conditions that are illegal even for adults, and unsafe and unhealthy and wrong for adults. And these children were being exploited, and their migrant status absolutely facilitated that exploitation. So Lety, what are the strategies that SEIU and your allies in the immigrant rights movement are pursuing to attack worker exploitation that is especially aimed at immigrants, but also may not just involve immigrant workers?
Absolutely. So that question speaks to the core of who we are as a labor movement. That the number one way that workers can, be protected from exploitation is through organizing. Simple. Full stop. We SEIU is known for, and the AFL is too, for investing in campaigns where low-wage workers are being taken advantage of. The Justice for Janitors campaign is a prime example where immigrant workers toiled at night cleaning the office buildings in major cities. The rules weren't written for them to be part of a union. It was a creative campaign to lift up who these workers were, how they toiled at night, to make sure that when the people who came into the offices in the morning, those offices. So those immigrant workers took on the biggest real estate titans and corporations to fight for their right for respect and dignity on the job. So organizing unions is the number one way that both the labor movement and even worker organizations and immigrant rights organizations touch immigrant workers across the country. And they know that's why we're allied with many immigrant rights organizations, because they see that workers have more power to win dignity and respect for labor. The second thing I would say is rewriting the rules so that more workers can be in labor unions, to raise the standards not only for themselves. Shannon spoke to this earlier, right? Corporations want to take advantage of workers, and so rewriting the rules so that we can create labor standards boards at the state level, and where corporations, unions, and government stand and deliver on standards for that industry at the state level or local level. And the third way, and we partnered with AFL on this, is to push for policies like deferred action, right, where workers are in labor disputes, they gain protections while that labor dispute is being investigated, and that provides a status for them, deferred action, so that they can work and breathe easily while their labor dispute is being investigated by any of the different agencies that investigate workplace issues. So I think those are three strong ways. And we will continue to, partner with our allies, the labor movement, to ensure we elevate as many as we can. And we, our duty is, our members have given us the duty to protect workers, and we will work with partners to do that. And the AFL is a strong partner.
Yeah, just two quick comments on that. I lived that issue of employers using immigration laws as a way not just to bust union organizing drives, but also to try to get out of the country workers whom they had cheated out of wages, had engaged in wage theft, had put in unsafe and unhealthy working conditions. And in both the Obama administration and the Biden administration, there were agreements struck between the Labor Department and the Department of Homeland Security to ensure that immigration laws couldn't be abused in that way by employers. A very, very difficult challenge because it puts immigration law in the toolkit of employers who
That's
want
right.
to exploit workers. The second is, you mentioned justice for janitors. You equally could have mentioned, and you sort of alluded to this in your second category, to the SEIU's effort with fast food workers in California, the California Fast Food Workers Union. We had the privilege of interviewing the leadership of that union here on Power at Work. And it's a very interesting, innovative model using the kind of labor standards board that you're describing, and I'm going to be curious to see if there's going to be successful efforts to recreate that in other parts of the country and other industries apart from fast food, although there's lots and lots of fast food workers in other states who would benefit from something similar. So Shannon, I want to turn to you. I want to ask the question a little bit differently, if you don't mind, but feel free to comment in any way that you would like. One of the central battlefields in the immigration fight, or the immigration and labor fight, is the informal economy and worker misclassification. I've heard about this at great length and very eloquently from the folks in the building trades, which is one of the areas where it's an issue, but it's an issue in healthcare and other industries as well. As you know, workers are paid off the books, or they're treated as independent contractors who do not have the rights that Lety was just talking about. They don't have the right to organize. They don't have the right to bargain collectively. They don't have the right to seek government intervention if they've experienced wage theft, been victimized by wage theft or exploitative hours or unsafe and unhealthy workplaces. So what are the AFL-CIO's union's strategies for going after immigration in the context of the informal economy and the struggle over worker misclassification?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think, we've seen so many of these downward implications of decades of failure to reform either our labor or immigration policies, right? And we have whole models of industry practice that have been developed to take advantage of those gaps in worker protections that have resulted from our congressional inaction on this. And so I think that, in the context of lots of federal investment coming into these industries, the urgency to address this stuff becomes more and more acute. And I'm just going to delve a little deeper into the, some of the things that Lety has already raised, and kind of talk about from a macro perspective. All right, so let's do a little visualization exercise in our federal budget. Okay, we know a budget is a moral document, and we invest in what we care about. So we spend about $2 billion in labor standards enforcement in our federal budget, right? Which sounds like a lot, but I think in federal budget numbers is kind of like pocket change. You find it in the couch, right? And comparatively, Seth, would you like to guess how much we spend on immigration enforcement?
My guess would be it's 15 or 20 times that amount.
Yeah, it's 25 billion at least, and continuing to grow. And so we have this incredible disparity, right, in what we are prioritizing from an enforcement perspective for the laws that we have in the books. And I think that explains a lot. I mean, it really helps our members understand how immigration threats have been weaponized as a tool of the boss to crush worker organizing, and why it is that, a worker can go, his whole career and never see an OSHA inspector, but have a very real and rational fear of an immigration raid, right? Because they've seen it on television. They've seen workers taken away from job sites in handcuffs while the companies that steal from them and put their lives in danger get off scot-free, right? And so I think this need to rebalance our enforcement priorities is key to fixing all of these issues, including misclassification transformation, right? Which we know is an intentional strategy of, of companies to work around their obligations under our labor, enforcement regime. And so, I think what we have always seen in the past is that, when immigrant workers speak up, they put themselves at risk. And these threats, have real potency because of the ability to lead to family separation, detention, removal. And so the new tools, affirmative tools that we've been able to work out, building on the work that you did in previous administrations, but now with the Biden-Harris team, really are moving towards affirmatively protecting workers who are at workplaces where there have been violations so that it is safe for them to report. And instead of being at risk, they are eligible for protections because they're speaking up. And that's the kind of transformational tools that we need if we are serious about wanting to, reduce workplace deaths and injuries and fatalities. If we want to rein in child labor, if we want to, reduce the rampant wage theft in this economy. And so I think there's a lot that we can learn from that and build on, but that's fundamentally the path forward. Is we have to make it safe and real for workers to pursue justice when their rights are violated, and that includes absolutely when they've been misclassified, when they should be, getting the full protections of our labor and employment laws.
Yeah, I love that your answer to the problem is more worker voice and more worker power. That's a very good answer. I think that that's an answer to a lot of the problems that we find in our economy. I'm sure you agree with that. So I want to address an unfortunate reality of this time in our politics. The debate over immigration in the United States and arguably around the world, as we discussed earlier, has shifted to the right. The popular metrics for government success are the number of people who are deported, whether the number of people crossing borders is rising or declining, and center-left parties around the world are allowing themselves to be held to those metrics. But even more troubling, we're seeing right-wing parties use what is just undeniably racist and xenophobic rhetoric against immigrants very effectively to build power here in the United States, but also among our European allies. And it's not just that a major party candidate can accuse immigrants of eating other people's dogs and cats. A central platform plank of the Republican Party in this presidential election is mass deportations. In fact, it's become a chant at their presidential candidates' rallies. They had signs, printed signs at the Republican National Convention, mass deportations now. I've been in and around this business for a really, really long time, long before either of you were born. I don't think I've ever heard that before in the United States. I mean, the kind of thing that you see at fascist and proto-fascist rallies in Europe, but we've never seen that kind of rhetoric, that kind of a policy plank before in the United States. So Shannon, what is the most effective response to this rightward shift on immigration in the United States?
Yeah, well, let me just start by saying that it's chilling what has been normalized, and how we never seem to be able to find a floor for what's acceptable to say. And so I think it's going to be a long road to move our national conversation back to some degree of just humanity and civility. I think from the perspective of where we sit and how we can contribute to that imperative, the most, the strongest response that we get, let's just say now, when President Schuler, said a year ago in her State of the Union speech that an immigrant doesn't stand between you and a good job, a billionaire does, that exploded on line, and it continues to be really effective messaging. I think that it is clear that we need to shift, like that the villainizing, dehumanizing of immigrants is an intentional effort to shift people's attention away from an anti-worker policy agenda. And we need to put the focus back. We need to make it clear who wins from that. We need to talk about what are the crimes that we're really concerned about, right? We're concerned about, stealing from workers, putting their lives at risk, and who wins from this. So I think, I think that the need to really reinforce our shared fate in this global economy, and the need for unity if we're going to push back against this corporate capture of our democracy, of our immigration system, of, all these other things, that's an obligation that we have to take on as a labor movement, progressive movement, everyone else. But it's going to take some time. But I think right now, at a minimum, we need to remind people, right, that the only one who wins when we fall for this divide and rule is, the folks who want to keep us divided and poor, right? And so that's our I think part of our task is to shift the focus back where it belongs. Corporate tax breaks for the wealthy while the rest of us struggle to put food on the table, those core messages. And obviously the mass deportation agenda is a recipe for economic disaster. So there's lots of factual layers like that as well. But for us, I think it's keep reminding us what team we're on, right? And that all workers need to be on the same team if we want to have any chance of winning.
Right. Right. And let me just say, I know you believe this as well. Mass deportations would absolutely be an economic catastrophe. They would be a societal, cultural, political catastrophe as well. I mean, the idea of deploying troops to round people up in the United States is a deeply frightening proposition. And Lety, that's where I'd like to go with you. You spend a lot of time working with immigrant communities of all kinds around the United States, and it's got to be incredibly frightening right now to live in a first-generation immigrant community. They are, in some communities like Springfield, but others as well, they're facing literal death threats. Folks are threatening to bomb their schools. They're calling in bomb threats. They are, we're at a very, very, very dangerous point in our society. What should the labor movement's response to that reality be?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, no sooner than the threats started to roll into Springfield, Ohio, our members who are Haitian were calling for us to make a public response, calling for, creating community amongst them, to be amongst their fellow union members, and also to call on electeds to speak up. Look, the people in Springfield, Ohio did the most beautiful thing they could do, to stand with, Haitians who were in the, sort of, la mira se dice en español, in the sort of eye of the Republicans and Trump and J.D. Vance. They stood up, they showed their solidarity, and that's exactly what we're doing. We issued a statement where, speaking to electeds, powerful electeds, to stand up to, and also we're creating community with those affected members. And, other members who aren't of the Haitian community also are speaking. So I think we need to look, solidarity is a union thing, right? Solidarity is one of our values, and that is exactly what we need to do. We also need to speak up, and we have done that, and we will continue to do that. Haitian members and members from across the globe are part of our union family, and we all stick up for each other, and members in our union do as well. And so we want to make sure that we're using our power in every place that we can to protect people and vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. Solidarity is not just a value. Solidarity is the path to power, right? There's just no other answer. Okay. We spent a lot of time talking about sort of sad, depressing topics about immigration. And it's unfortunate because immigration is such an enlivening, enriching part of the American culture. And I just I didn't go there, and I really should have gone there. We could have spent a lot of time talking about what it is that the immigrant members of labor unions bring to their unions, to their communities, to our society. I'm a big, as you can tell by looking at me, I'm a big foodie. My wife is a huge foodie. And I mean, we spend a lot of time in immigrant communities because we love the food. We absolutely embrace the food and the culture and the music and their contributions are so valuable to us. And so I don't want to close on a negative note. It would be easy to spend this conversation. I want to move out of the negativity and move into something a little bit, give you an opportunity to move into something more positive. And this is a question I ask of many of our guests on all of our labor topics. And it's this, and I'll start with you, Lety, and then I'll let you close, Shannon. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of America, labor, and immigration?
I am optimistic.
There we go.
Look, our members, SEIU members, are knocking doors in battleground states. I was with our members who traveled from Los Angeles, who are education workers, who actually went on strike at One Big about a year ago. They traveled to Nevada to talk to voters, and they are excited. It was 100 and something degrees in Las Vegas, and they were excited to be there. They were excited to be on the doors. Look, our joy comes from, those members who are out there battling it out, talking to voters one-on-one, and they are doing a great job of it. And we are riding this momentum, and we're going to carry it through the election. That's what I'm optimistic about. I'm optimistic also in both our labor unions, our labor movement, and also standing with allies. Look, we've had a partnership for well over a decade, and it's only getting stronger. And when we win in November, we're going to do great things. When we have the first woman president come next year in January. So, I'm excited about that. I'm excited about our member leaders, our partnerships, and winning the future. And as our president, April Barrett, says, let's go get it.
I've heard her say that. Shannon, what about you? Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of America, labor, and immigration?
Well, I guess I would say that I don't see how you can be optimistic about the future of America or labor without immigration. It's key to all of it, right? And that is, in some ways, it's just it's a call to like reconnect with our history, right? We know that successive waves of immigrants and refugees have always helped to build, serve, feed our nation, but also our labor movement and our unions. And I feel this really powerful reconnection with that going on in this moment of so much resurgence of organizing, of workers really rising up to demand fair pay, treatment, respect on the job, and so much of the leadership of that resurgent organizing coming from immigrant workers who in some ways risk the most to stand up and to speak up. And so I think reconnecting right to the power of what's possible when we come together is something that our immigrant members have been at the heart of, and it's creating this amazing pipeline of new leaders of our labor movement who who look like the workforce and understand the issues and really make us so much stronger and prepared for the future. So, I will say that it may be not so surprising that we have immigrant members knocking doors in Nevada or California, but I'm in Nebraska, and we're doing it here too. Construction workers and everybody. So this is, this is an issue where we're going to see, I think, real potential for change and growth and possibility coming from everywhere, and that this is part of what it's going to mean to just keep this economy humming and to build, build the emerging, country that we know we all are eager to see.
Lety Salcedo, Shannon Lederer, thank you so much for joining this tough, but I think valuable and ultimately optimistic conversation about labor and immigration in America. Thank you so much for spending time with Power at Work.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much for sticking with us for this conversation about labor and immigration. I hope you found it as refreshing as I did. The discussion around immigration in the public debate is frankly disgusting and dehumanizing, I think. But giving labor advocates who view immigrants not as the enemy, but as fellow workers and people with whom forging solidarity is the correct solution to the problem, and who are not the exploiters, but the exploited, and people that we should work closely with and welcome to our country, like we welcome my grandparents and many members of their generation. I think it's refreshing to hear that kind of discourse. And that's why we were really proud to bring you Shannon and Lety today. Now, you can connect with Power at Work in a lot of ways. Most important, you can now comment on every post on Power at Work. Just go to the bottom of the page, tell us what you think. If you don't feel like writing something, and you don't always want to write something, sometimes you just want to give a thumbs up. If you want to do that, there's a thumbs up button in our comment section. Just hit that. It'll let us know that you appreciate the content that we're putting out. But we're also available to you on lots of social media channels. We have pages on LinkedIn and Facebook. You can obviously comment there. Just search Power at Work to find our pages. You can find us at Power at Work blog on Twitter, X, and Threads. You can send us a DM through those channels as well. You can find us at Power at Work on Instagram and TikTok. You can comment there if you would like, and you can find all of the Power at Work blogcasts on the Burns Center for Social Change's YouTube channel. So there's lots of places to find these blogcasts and podcasts. You should be watching each and every one of them. They're all worth it, I promise you. Thanks again for joining us, and we will see you again on Power at Work very soon.
Public professionals, would you like to learn how data, digital innovation, and AI skills can improve your work and help you serve your constituents better? The answer is Innovate US. Innovate US offers no-cost learning on the skills you need to succeed in government in the 21st century. Attend a 1-hour weekly workshop or enroll in a course on AI or human-centered design at your own pace. It's all free to you. Visit innovate-us.org today to learn more and sign up. That's Innovate-US. Visit right now.